Hey, I'm Tim,
And I'm Sarah.
and this is Mic'd Up Marketing, a segment of the Brand Roots podcast. These are the conversations we have anyway, whether we're deep in a strategy call or talking shop after a client meeting, but now we're micing ourselves up and hitting record. We talk about the ins and outs of running a brand studio, what's working in marketing, what's broken, and how businesses can actually grow with a strategy that makes sense. So if you're a creative, a marketer, or a business owner trying to figure it out while building something meaningful, you're in the right place. This is Mic'd Up Marketing. Let's get into the show.
All right. Hey, Tim.
Hello.
Hi. I am excited for today because we get to do an interview with you of your story and your entrepreneurial journey and how you ended up starting a company and fulfilling a lifelong dream. So I am going to just ask you some questions on just like your journey. And I'd love for you to first just introduce us on who you are and what is it that you do at Stump Root.
Oh, well, I'm Tim. I am a husband, father of a 2-year-old daughter and soon-to-be son coming on the way. I have... I don't know. I'm a believer in Jesus. I'm big into filmmaking and design and marketing, and I co-run a creative studio called Stump Root, as I hope you guys know by now. And this is something that I've dreamed of for a long time, and so that's who I am and what I do.
So where did your creative journey begin?
My creative journey began on October 7th, 1994, suddenly. So as a kid, I've always been into artistic stuff. I would say I've had art on both sides of my family. My mom's side, there was mostly music. So my mom is a classically trained singer. She sang in Brooklyn Tabernacle for many years. And her father was a acoustic guitarist. And on my dad's side, my grandfather was a artist, still is, and he's a painter mostly, but he did a lot of great drawing. And so I kind of had that influence immediately. And, being into like Pokemon, all that stuff, it just like, kids draw, and then you notice that you're a little bit better than most people. And I would say that's pretty much where my journey started there.
So you were drawing, doodling around, and then was there like an evolution of that? Did that inspire like some other gifts for you?
Well, I think I've always just been into the arts as a whole. My father, when he was younger, he had like film cameras and stuff. And so I think it was more of a hobby. I don't think my dad is particularly explicitly artistic in a nice way, So I think it was something that he just enjoyed doing, And so I had all this stuff in the background. Like my parents, as most parents do, when they go on vacations, they have cameras. And so at a young age, my parents bought me a Coolpix, like a Nikon Coolpix, just like their standard, point and shoot camera. And so we just take little pictures. And when I was super young, I would make little films, little shorts with my cousins. And, and just like you don't realize what you're doing because you're just like, oh, that'd be so cool. And just because, you don't really realize that these are careers or these are passions or callings even, I might say. On your life, you do it because you like doing it.
Yeah.
So I would say I had all these things kind of swirling in the background, and I really noticed with filmmaking, I was always a big fan of movies. My parents, we're from New York, and I mean, movies are big everywhere, but especially in New York, it's almost like a culture of going to the movies. And so that was something I grew up with very much. It's regularly going to the movies. So going to the theaters is almost like a religious experience for me. Just the smells, the popcorn, the lights, the seats. It's almost like going to church. Not quite, but it just makes me feel at home in a lot of ways, So that was just something I just grew up with and kind of set the stage for who I am.
As a side topic, who is the best filmmaker if you're such a movie guy? Or who's your favorite?
I have a few. I would say there's definitely a top 5 of best filmmakers. At least, I don't know, widely known, because there's other ones I'm just, I don't know any of those French filmmakers that make that avant-garde crap. But I would say, obviously Spielberg makes the best movies. He literally invented the blockbuster movie. I would say he's definitely top two, top three. Hitchcock, of course, like iconic filmmaker, like made he is a lot of these guys they create the template for filmmaking, and then now it's like, oh well, other people do it really well too, but I'm like, but they didn't create the template. So Hitchcock was definitely one of those pioneers for that. Orson Welles, obviously another incredible filmmaker. And more recently, Denis Villeneuve is incredible. I think he's quickly elevated to my top favorite more recently. And I mean, everyone loves, Quentin Tarantino and, some of those other guys. I've always been a big fan of Ridley Scott. He's made some of those incredible films, most important films of all time. So those would be my short list.
Yeah, I think that's its own podcast episode for sure.
Don't even get me started.
So it sounds like you're drawing, you're doing your artwork, and then it's like you're watching these movies growing up in that culture in New York, and movie making, which can also coincide with music, obviously, because so much of a movie's story is with music. It's like just straight up arts and creativity and innovation. And then was there any other gift that kind of like that came from that, like, or just inspiration that came from watching those movies and you're doing your art and everything?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I eventually learned that I can sing. Like, that was never something I grew up knowing I could sing. Eventually I learned how to play the piano, and I've always wanted to play the drums. Never learned how to play the drums though. But I would say with all those things, I eventually started to put them into practice, and that's how I actually started developing, with more intention, like with art. Like I have this story of like my grandfather, he would babysit us on my dad's side, and we'd always ask him to draw stuff. And so one of my favorite video games at the time was called Jack 2 from, Naughty Dog. They make The Last of Us. And so we had the strategy guide, and so we would say, hey, Poppy, draw this. And so he would just, draw these incredible drawings for us every time he'd babysit us. So that's kind of really where we, both me and my sister got our artistic skill. My youngest sister Olivia, she has more of the music side, and so I feel like I'm the middle child, and more than one way. Or my oldest sister, she was more specifically drawing art wise, and then I was both, and then my little sister was music. So that's that.
Yeah. I feel like different art forms could like reinforce each other. And, usually when someone's into one thing, they're into all these other art forms as well. And so I was just curious on like that process for you. Was there a moment where you realized, hey, you know what? Like, I love art and I love filmmaking, and I don't want this to just remain a hobby. It would be really cool for me to be able to actually like do this like for work.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it was never an option for me, like doing art as a career. Just growing up, my parents are very much more pragmatic when it comes to career choices and stuff. And so I, from a very young age, knew that I couldn't be an artist. Because of course you always have the idea of like the starving artist. And when I was younger, I was like, I loved, and I still do love dinosaurs. But every young boy wanted to be an or a paleontologist because, oh, that's so cool, dinosaur bones. But I'm like, it probably would have been a good career for me in more than one way. But I had all these like different ideas, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. Like that was something I always struggled with as a kid. Like I didn't have one specific career path planned out because I didn't have one specific skill set, and that caused a lot of different kind of tension in my life. But I just knew I had things I really liked, and I would say an inciting incident for this stuff, I would say, was originally from New York. So we moved to Lancaster about 20 years ago now, and I was sitting down watching Signs, with Mel Gibson, M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, which is one of my favorite movies. And I was looking through the special features because like, oh, I'm bored. Let me, what else is on this DVD? And then there was like a making of like documentary video. And I'm like, what? Yeah, people make these movies. Like, this is something people do. It's not just like, plop from the heavens, like, something out of like the Ten Commandments. Like, it's a real thing that people do for their lives.
Yeah.
And just seeing the behind the scenes, I'm like, oh, this looks so cool. And telling a story that, not that it resonated with me as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, but seeing such an impactful story. I knew how good the movie was just at that age. And so it was something that just awoken that idea of becoming a filmmaker. And I couldn't really shake it since.
Yeah, I could see that like aha moment coming into your brain and being like, wait a minute, this doesn't have to just remain a hobby. Like I could actually make money from this and like literally live out my passions and stuff. And it's funny how like kids can have that like awareness at even just like a young age. It's like, wait, something shifted. And so for you then
something has changed within me.
Don't even get me started. I will sing that whole score. That's the podcast episode. Me just singing Wicked.
Let's do it.
We're Wicked fans for anybody who wants to know. So was there any part of you that was like, well, I should probably then like hone in on these skill sets and like maybe go to school, or like how did you even start to really like get into that? Or was it all just like, hey, I'm just gonna be self-taught?
Yeah, I've always wanted to. I think it's not that I blame my parents too much. I can't, because they're trying to do what they think is best, like, and I had a lot of discouragement, not from my parents, but just other people in general. Just like, a family member would just be like the most like, oh, you'll never be able to do it. You won't be good enough, and people will hate it. And so like, I would say I was kind of that typical melancholic, film boy. And I didn't know that I was part of that until later. I'm like, oh, I'm like everyone else who wants to be a filmmaker. But I would say I wanted to go into film school. I guess what I did was I graduated high school, and I didn't really do amazing in high school, like for school. Like I would get A's and B's, but I was, I think the term for me would be like a C student. And I don't think that a lot of people had high expectations for me, family included. And so I applied to the school, local, Millersville, and I got in, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, what the heck do I do? Like I had thought about doing film school, like I was saying before, but it's something that I guess I didn't take seriously myself, Not that I didn't fantasize or dream about it, because, I did. There are things that I dreamt about, like and YouTube channels I'd watch, like Film Riot. I think pretty much everyone who's into filmmaking, who's at least younger, has watched Film Riot on YouTube, and tons of YouTube shows like Indie Mogul was the other big one at that time. And so just like everyone else at my age, high school age, just like you learn by watching YouTube, and you fantasize about going to film school. And the problem is, and I do have jealousy for these people, is I didn't have friends growing up, but a lot of other people who were into filmmaking, they did. And so they were able to do short films in high school. They were able to, and I literally, there was a couple groups in my high school that were into the stuff. I just, no one wanted me to be their friend. So I didn't have the environment where I can grow in that practical way. So I had to like grow inside of my head as far as my skill sets. Like I've told this to other people, where I didn't have a computer that could run any editing software. I had like this old Windows PC. Like I didn't have a laptop or anything. I just had this family computer, and I would just my turn on the computer, I would just watch tutorials and videos and of how to use After Effects and Premiere and all these Adobe softwares. So I learned how to use it long before I could actually use it. That was something that I just committed to doing. And the other person I loved was Andrew Kramer with a Video Copilot. What's up? Andrew Kramer here. Anyway, so he was another hugely influential person, and so I just learned about a lot of different stuff, and watching movies and just trying to grow in the small ways I could. Yeah, it wasn't until college where I actually got a computer. Like I think like my sophomore year, I got my own laptop that could run all that software.
It's life altering.
Yeah, I was like, oh man, and I graduated high school early. I was 17 years old. So my first year of college, I turned 18. So I'm just trying to think what else. Yeah, so I didn't, I've always wanted to go to filmmaking school. There are some schools like Full Sail University. That was something I like fantasize about going to. That's one of not the big ones, but that is a popular one. It's not like New York or LA or, anything like that, where they have like actual big filmmaking schools that the real filmmakers go to. And not to imply that real filmmakers don't go to Full Sail, But Full Sail is a different kind of school. It's like a full-time school where you can't work, and it's like a 2-year straight program. And part of me wishes I could have gone, because there's a lot of that practical experience you do get, and also the connections, which is one of the more important things you get from school. But that was something that kind of skipped over me.
Yeah, there's like, so far it just sounds like there was this desire to, I'm going to learn this no matter what, even if I don't have all the equipment, all the software. It's kind of funny to learn a skill set without actually being able to like do it. You know, it'd be like watching like a piano tutorial and then not having a piano to practice on. And so like your mind just becomes this like bottomless pit of information, but you're like, I need to get this out of me. You know, I need to actually put this somewhere. And so that it's cool to be able to finally you have the equipment and you're just like, I'm going to do it. And it was just like a long time coming for you. When you had mentioned school and everything, and were you able to just like learn at like Millersville at least some skill sets to get you by, or like how was your like college experience with that?
Well, so at school, I was undecided for the longest time, like the first literally 2 years, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, like I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I found a note from my high school self, like I think my freshman year of high school, saying that I secretly want to become a graphic designer. It was just such a weird thing that it's almost like I didn't allow myself to have desires in those ways. Like I didn't allow myself to want to become a filmmaker or a graphic designer because, you know, I won't make enough money. Because my biggest insecurity growing up, in some ways still is being able to provide for my family, for my own family. Like, and so maybe other men struggle with that, I'm not sure, but I definitely struggled with that for a long time. Like, that I would be inadequate to provide. That I wouldn't work hard enough. I wouldn't do whatever to provide for them. And so to me, it was almost like a pipe dream to be able to get married, have a family, my wife stay home, and I am able to work and provide. You know, I had a lot of anxiety about that stuff growing up. And so kind of going back to school, like I didn't know what I wanted to do, you know, and so I was undecided for a long time. And then I had talked with my youth pastor. I mean, at that point I was, you know, 19, 20 years old, but he was like a mentor to me. And so we were kind of talking through it, and he was like, well, so I know someone, my one friend's sister-in-law, I think, she used to go to the church or something. Anyway, she was a connection of his, and she was a graphic designer and a Christian, and so he linked her up with me and had a phone call with her, and she had gone to Millersville as well, and she was just talking about the career and all those kinds of things. So she gave me a lot of awesome advice. Yep. Her name is Michelle Perez. She actually interacts with me still on LinkedIn. So she gave me a lot of helpful like points in the right direction, and so I became, you know, at first, well, even before I became a graphic designer major, I would say I was pushed to do computer engineering, like software and stuff. And if you know me, you know my brain doesn't work that way even a little bit. I think there's part of me that does like some of it, like the logic-based stuff, you know, if-then statements, but it just, my brain could not handle it, and I struggled so severely. And that was really the beginning of the end for me at school. And I had the class. I had actually a few computer science classes. And a part of me liked it, but then the other part, I'm like, I just can't wrap my head around this stuff. Like I was not built for this. And it was like, you know, square in a round peg. You know, I'm like, I can't fit into this, you know. And I'm sure like a lot of people can relate to feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I remember like sitting, waiting for tutoring in the class, and the guy, I think he wasn't even really, I don't know, maybe he just knew I was like a lost cause for it. And he like helped me a little bit, but I'm like, okay. And then I just remember like sitting there crying because I'm like, why can't I do this? You know? And so then eventually, you know, I flunked out of those classes, of course. And it wasn't from a lack of trying. I really tried. I couldn't do it. And then that's when I got to graphic design. But in truth, I'd been doing graphic design for a few years before that, at that point, just helping with church, like bulletins and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm in college now. And so I finally get into it, and I start to feel like at home because I'm an artist. It was connected because there's not really much of a design program in Millersville. Maybe there's a bit more of it now that it's been almost 10 years since I've, man, it's crazy getting older. But so we and I enjoyed a lot of it, but it was like it's almost like the damage was done. Like too much damage was done from the computer science stuff because like I just could not get my brain back on right. Just screwing up left and right, and I liked doing the work and I learned a lot. But it's like it's like when you're falling and you try to catch yourself like by running, but it's like I can't. I'm falling too fast to catch myself, and so that's pretty much what happened. And I struggled, and I subsequently flunked out of college because I just couldn't catch myself. Even though I had gotten into the program that I liked, more or less, and I definitely have major issues with the design program, at least at that time. But but there's also some other great teachers there too. So I'm not trying to throw shade at people. Like there was a lot of passion there, but I couldn't handle it. I couldn't. I think I got into college too soon, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I took a pretty huge misstep, and I think that really kind of screwed it up for me. And I have to take personal responsibility. I'm not blaming it on anything else. Like it's me at the end of the day, but at least there were reasons why that happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like school, I think could be so hard for creatives because it's not really designed for that. Even if it's like college, sometimes like not everybody has the same learning channel, and some people can struggle with different mental issues. ADHD is like a really common thing among creatives too. And like just professors could have some like really crazy desires or like standards for their students that they're like, hey, I'm just in here to like do my art, and have fun. And like they take it almost like too seriously. And that can just be really discouraging to a lot of creatives. Post school. So like you flunked out. You're not feeling too great about that, obviously. Where was your next steps in your journey?
Well, while I was still in school, I got a job at this video production company, and that itself is its own little story. But I got hired to do motion graphics for another company. It was it was one of their clients, and so that's what I was doing. I got hired, and for the time it was really great pay, like 17 an hour, and it was like my first like real job, quote unquote. Like I'd worked at Chick-fil-A for like 3 years, and then I got a job at Staples for a little while, and I was still there through college. And then I get this job at this video production company, and it was a very interesting experience to say the least. Lots of those people who left the company they have their own production companies now, and they're incredibly talented. I would say they were the talent in the company, to put it nicely. So that's what I was hired to do, this motion graphics. And then I all this stuff was happening in the background, like through college classes, and I was gaining weight also, and just I was going through so much like inner turmoil, and I really struggled with food, to say the least. And again, that could be its whole other story, but I just wasn't doing well, mentally. And so with that job, and I held out to that job for a little while, and so it was like I finally had a job in this really cool place, and I was doing film or video production. Like initially it started just as motion graphics, but then everyone in the company left, for many reasons. But it was just like me and two other people there, and then eventually it was just me and one other guy, and so that was fun. But that's where we ended up going, and that's what we were doing.
What was the next step beyond flunking out of school and like you're now in this production company, and like it sounds like it was a step in the right direction because like your dream is to do movies and like you love film and everything, but then you're able to exercise some of these other skill sets of motion graphics and
Yeah.
all of that. But it also sounds like there was just like hardship and like challenges kind of surrounding you within that role. Was there anything that kind of sticks out about it, or like a challenge that you had to overcome in that job?
So the boss was a hothead, to say the least.
Mm.
I remember talking about the story when I, first got us the next job I got after it. It was such a turn. It was such a difference. He was a young guy. He was a little bit younger than me. I am now, but back then, it was several years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And so I learned what it's like to run a studio poorly, to say the least. Because I saw the cool parts of it, like I saw what it's
Yeah.
like to have your own studio and like, oh, this is such a cool thing. You can do what you love for a living. Like you can meet cool people and you can have sometimes a relaxed morning and you can, it's like, it was so different than any other job I've ever had. And I think a lot of creatives dream about doing that, like doing what you love to do and get paid for it. Like it was, in a different way, a dream come true. And I knew I was going in the right direction, but it was really tumultuous. And again, he was a hothead. You had to really walk on eggshells around him. And I saw what it was like to lead poorly. And so there was some lessons I learned from him, but not the lessons he wanted me to learn, and he was also, pretty insecure and stuff. And so it just like, it led there was a lot of negativity within that company. Like looking back, like I understand why it was like he was stressed financially and he wasn't getting the clients. And I could see like where his errors were within it. Because now I'm his age, where he was at that point. And I'm like, all right, well, I would be stressed out too if I had to provide for 10, 15 people. And because there's a lot more to running a studio than people realize, even if it's a 1 or 2 person operation.
Yeah.
So I would say I was, learning, in so many ways what I want to do and how to do it in a different way. But one of those things that happened around that same time, 2016, 2017, was this dream to create my own studio kind of grew in my heart. And I didn't tell too many people about it because it's like, it seems like a pipe dream. It's like, especially growing up with those insecurities I had before, I'm like, am I going to even be able to do work for other people? I already struggle with school. I already, you know, but I was always good at work. And that's why I was like, well, like if I'm at work, I can do the work, but I always struggled through school. And so I'm like, all right, well, am I going to be able to do this? It's probably too foolish to even tell other people. And truthfully, I didn't really have many friends at all, if any. And so I, there's might have been a couple of people I told this dream to, but more or less it was just something like inside my heart. And, as a believer, as a Christian, I wanted to give it an important name. And so one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Isaiah 11, and it's talking about the Messiah. The passage is a prophecy about the Messiah, which, Christians know as Jesus. And it's talking about the stump of Jesse and the root of David. And so I'm like, oh, this little name, stump and root, it's like this double entendre or triple entendre, depending how you read it and interpret it, has multiple meanings, but I really love that stump and root. And so I'm like, all right, if I have a studio, this is what I want to name it, stump and root. And so I just held on to that for years and not ever really knowing if I can actually create that studio or if I'd be able to run a studio or whatever. And
there it is. Yeah. I think it's cool that you were having, like, it's kind of ironic. Like, when you are working at an actual production company, you're met with all these challenges and you're learning what not to do. And it's almost like this like foreshadowing of, hey, this is what you don't do so that you could one day have your own thing too. And then during that time, you're given like this seed of hope, like this little shoot, a little plant inside, like where things feel really lost and like dead, and it's a name and you hold on to that and you don't let that go. And I think that's really inspiring, because like a lot of people look at the desert or the wilderness seasons of their life as just all bad, and they're like, oh, there's nothing good that came from that. And that's not true. Like if you really look back on your life, often it's those desert seasons and those wanderings where we actually find out a lot about ourselves and the calling that we have for our life. And that seems to be what like kind of happened for you. So it's really inspiring, like if anyone's listening, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm at a job I hate and it's just so stressful, or like they're being mistreated by their boss or what, like whatever, like, or maybe they just got let go. There could actually be a lot of valuable just a lot of value in that wandering and everything. And so we have to remain patient in that suffering, because that can teach us something one day. Um, so how long were you at that production company? Like, did you stay a long time, or were you like, you know what, I need to get out of here?
It was only a year and a half. It really
Okay.
wasn't that long. I mean, it felt like at that point, it felt like a long time, because I
Hmm.
was, and it kind of all came to a head, where just because he expected everyone to read his mind, and that's what bad leaders, like a telltale sign of bad leadership is that they expect you to do what's in their brain. And so I remember this a couple times. Actually, one was like right before my birthday, and I asked for a raise, and and again, hindsight is he was extremely stressed out about financials for the company and staying afloat. Not that I'm giving him any credit because he was a jerk. So I want to be that clear. I'm clear about that. But um, but I asked for a raise because I'm like, well, I'm making 17. I'm like, I've been here long enough and I'm contributing a lot, and I feel like I should earn more. And then, of course, and a lot of this is how you know you have a bad work culture or just bad company you work at, is then all of a sudden all the critiques come out of nowhere, stuff that they've never told you about or talked to you about. I'm like, oh well, you do this and you do this and that, and I don't like
Hmm.
this and blah 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 and this and this, and actually with that project you did. I'm like, so why didn't you never tell me any of this? And because they want to weaponize it against you, and that's what he did. And he told me to shut up and get back to work. So
Oh my goodness.
and then I just knew it was the beginning of the end, in so many ways. And so then the next year it was April, and it was sporadic. It's not like I was working every single day at that point, because it was just like, all right, well, we'll call you when we need you, essentially. And so that was my only job at that point. And I was in school still, and it was just off and on. And so then I actually no, I think at that point I flunked out. I flunked out, yeah, about that time, end of 2016, going into 2017. I still had that job, but it was just like not going well. Not because of me, uh, but because of just the state of the studio and just not having clients. And so we get to April, and he was down in Florida for a project, and I didn't do exactly what he had imagined. Kind of go back to what I was saying before, like. I I guess missed the mark for him. He had some things he wanted me to do. I didn't realize I needed to do them, and he was so angry with me. He was like, "You're fired," and just fired me right on the spot. And I was like, "Okay," and I was just like, I couldn't. I was like, I couldn't believe it, but I was also like, "Good riddance." He called
Yeah.
me over the phone and fired
Toodles.
me, essentially. And so I was so done. I'm like, "All right, fine." And so I just pack up my stuff, I clear my computer, and I leave. And then he tried to call me back because he needed me to finish the project, because
Hmm.
he was such a hothead. He fired me on the spot instead of like talking me through it and whatever. And so and I ignored his calls. And I'm like, I'm not going to work for this bozo another minute longer. And I've already dealt with two bosses that are just like him, like the same personality, and so I've had a fair amount of experience with bosses like that. And so I left, and he texted me because I ignored his calls. He was like, "Yeah, leave your stuff. You're done. Whatever. Leave your key on my desk. You're done." And so, and then that kind of set a long spiral for many years for myself. For from 2017 until 2020. Really, it's a long, long time for me. Like, I didn't have a consistent job. I tried to get jobs after that. It was just a whole tumultuous thing. I was briefly homeless for like a half hot second. I applied to like dozens of studios, and I was building my portfolio. I started a film photography club in Lancaster and met tons of new connections. And I, to kind of bring me into the next stage of life, I was dating my girlfriend, now wife at the time. And it was just, I felt like nothing was going right, and I was just struggling. So that was the darkest time of my life, most definitely. I felt truly hopeless in every way possible. Like, am I ever going to be able to get married? Can I actually even get a job? Why won't anyone hire me? What am I supposed to do with my life? And just like all these things. I was in my mid 20s. I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? And so it was just a deep, deep depression for me, even though I didn't want to stay there. I was still actively trying to work my way and crawl my way out of that that hole. But it just, I didn't really know how to get out of it. But I was just doing my best. I was building my portfolio, trying to build Instagram up, and I was doing a little bit of LinkedIn, not too much, but once in a blue moon I might, just because I knew how important it was even at that point. And so so that's what that's what I was doing. And then eventually I started to get to a point where we create our own young adult Bible study at my, again, then girlfriend's house, apartment. It was only like a few people that showed up. And the one guy who, became a friend, and I was telling him my story up until that point of joblessness and struggling and so on and so forth. And he was like, "Bro, I can get you a job like tomorrow." And I was like, "Oh no."
He said
And
it
not
just like that too.
Yeah, love you, Sam. So he gives me the job. The job is at a chicken hatchery, and I can't express how much I hated that job. I had to get up before dawn, drive 20 miles, and it's stinky, it's hot, it's disgusting. You're cleaning up like the equipment for hatching chicks, and then you're sorting the chicks, and it's just like, man. And then it was like that for 8 hours, and I only got paid 13 an hour, and it was horrible. Actually, I was getting paid like 12 or an hour or something like that. And they had, because just like at my previous job, they were underpaying me what they should have been paying me. So it's just like, story of my life, literally, of being underpaid for something they promised me. So they got it squared away though. But anyway, so I just hated it. But I had this feeling like I'm only going to be here 3 months. I had this like deep feeling inside of myself. And so that was like a little hope I held on to, but I was still extremely ungrateful and frustrated, because for a long time I was doing freelance work with the company I still do freelance work for occasionally, Crossing Ground. And they were like, truly a godsend, literally a godsend in that dark season, because like at least I would do some freelance and then I don't have enough money to buy my girlfriend dinner or a birthday present when her birthday was there. It was like I always had money at the exact right time for that stuff, and I can pay my phone bill and this and that. So I'm like, I was okay, but I was still like living at my parents' house, and it was horrible. And so and during the time before I had the hatchery job, I had this deep feeling in my spirit. I was like, I don't want manna anymore. Like, I want the promised land, And then, if you're familiar with the Bible, after the Israelites complain about the manna, literally this in Hebrew is called, what is this? It's like this heavenly stuff that God gave them to eat. He then gave them quail, which is a bird. And so after me complaining about this manna, which was my freelancing, I got a job in a chicken hatchery. So the irony was not lost on me at all. And, it was almost like, fair enough, God, but also please.
Yeah.
So I had that job, and I started at the end of 2020, and it sucked. And I was like, God, please, there has to be something else for me. I can't, because I was like, starting to think about like, do I have to build my life around this crappy job? Like, I don't want my life to be this, like living in poverty and doing this stinky work that, I don't like and I'm not fulfilled in. And so then got an email from someone who thought I was only doing freelance work. And was like, hey, would you want to take, freelance off the road and maybe, review for this company at this fire pit company? I was like, this is it. It's happening, and so I got the email probably January 2021, and it was just like, it's going to happen, And he had known about me through his friend that I met because we created the film photography club. So, it all kind of circled back, all that work. It was just foundational work. I just didn't know it was, like I made connections with the film photography. I learned social media and all that stuff through that time as well. And so all these skills were still developing, even though I couldn't really put them to use, kind of like how it was with me in high school. And so that leads me to, I interview, and I did a terrible job because, it's like my brain, and, Sarah can relate to this, where our brains just like shut down. We're like, it's like, and I'm like, I don't know if you've ever seen the episode of SpongeBob where they have to open like a fine dining experience at the Krusty Krab. And so SpongeBob needs to become this this high-end like waiter. And so it was Squidward had to pretend the Krusty Krab was like some high-end restaurant that he owned to impress his like rival Squilliam. And so then he was trying to get SpongeBob to be the waiter. And so he's like, forget everything you know. All you know is like fine dining and breathing. So then you see his like internal head, like all his little SpongeBobs running around his brain are just like throwing out all the files and everything, except for obviously fine dining and breathing. Oh, and then they pull it off, and it's like the best experience. And SpongeBob was like the best waiter and everything. And then the Squilly, he was like, "So tell me, sir, what is your name?" And he's like, "My name." And then it cuts back to his head, and he's like, "What's his name? We threw out his name." So he couldn't remember his name. So that's, to give you a little short.
Give you all a visual and auditory representation of what goes on for Tim when he's interviewing, and me sometimes too.
Yep. So that is what happened, and I did a horrible job in the interview. Like I didn't fully answer questions because like my brain, I'm like, that's how it is. So that's fun for me. But but it was still like, okay, well, we're gonna, we'll let you know in a couple of weeks. And I had this strong feeling like I'm gonna get it, and I'm not gonna get it at the same time, and I couldn't explain that feeling to me, and so 2 weeks later, I get the job, or I don't get the job. Sorry, I do not get it. He emails me and says, "Hey, so we're giving it to someone else. However, my brother-in-law has an opening for someone just like you." And so I was able to use all of my skill sets that I'd been growing for those years and years up until that point. And that led me down, the next steps to what would lead to Stump Root.
Wow. Yeah, it's so funny because like the story that you're telling just so far, it's like, it's not this straight shoot, clear path. It's like so windy and there's so many twists and turns in it. And it's like, wait, does he get it? Does he not? Like, does he stay at the job? Oh, he got fired. Oh no, like you're working at a crappy job, literally a crappy job at the hatchery, and so you're at this new job though, and it's like the prayers are answered,
clouds have parted,
and all is well in the world, and this is the job, right? Or
I knew in my heart that it wasn't the job. I knew it was going to be a really good thing for me that would help me push me to the next level. Like I always knew that, and so I loved that job for the first year and a half or so. And so I'm not going to get too deep into it. I just will say that I learned a lot. I was able to harness and hone my skill sets, specifically in photography and video. I think I really was able to finally stretch my legs and use the skills I had already learned before, but now actually have the practical skills to kind of come with that. And so with the work that we did, I built up the social media from 1,000 people to over 25,000 before Sarah came on board. I did so much. Every time I say this, I always have to prerequisite. I'm trying to say this in a humble way, and it never sounds humble, and I understand why it never sounds humble. I always try to advocate for myself because, the truth is, if you don't, no one else will.
Ain't that the truth?
And so I try to say, but also the Bible says, let others brag about you. So I find myself in this kind of like conflicting, like, well, I need to show people and talk about the skills I have, and try not to be braggadocious or whatever, how you ever say it. But I know that I need to talk about my experience. So I will say that I was very successful in what I did, and the company benefited greatly because of it. I'll just say that. And, in a way that, for our portfolio, for what we did there, like there was no one doing marketing for swing sets, at least not residential swing sets.
Yeah.
And even for commercial, no one's doing good commercial content. They have photography, but that's about it. And the truth is, no one knew how to photograph swing sets well. No one, not a single one. Everyone was using like their 24 millimeter photo like lens on their iPhone, and the swing sets never looked nice, and they could never understand why. And then through my experimenting, like, oh, what if I just use these other lenses? And it turned out to work, and obviously they look so much better. So, with the videos we were creating, we saw like a dramatic shortening of the sales cycle. It went from like multiple weeks all the way down to like even a couple days, because the selling was happening before they even talked to a salesman. So all that to say, it went well until it didn't. But at some point, and you can listen to this part in Sarah's entrepreneurial journey, where we talk a little bit more in depth about this, but I got her on board, and it was nice to have a team and someone that obviously is family, and that we could work really well together. And then eventually you hired my other friend to do photography, or at least some of the photography. And then it just fell apart. I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot I could say, and I have, but I will say that it wasn't working, and I wasn't wanted within the company, and so more or less we were pushed out, and we went into this other business selling landscape edging for this company. The thing that's really important about this part is that right before we left the previous job, I absolutely knew that I wanted to start Stump Root.
That's right. Yeah.
I never kind of gone, a little bit backwards. I didn't grow up with entrepreneurship as an idea in my head. My parents, again, like so pragmatic. They're like, all right, well, you work for a company, you get the 401k, you do the normal business thing, the normal job thing. You live that life, you get pay raises and so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that. It didn't feel like that was me. And I never knew why, because the idea of entrepreneurship was never introduced to me. But my one friend from college, Jaron, which I met in the design program, he was like Morpheus in The Matrix, where he presented me these two options. He was like, with blue, you can live a normal life, you can have the okay, but you'll be a slave to someone else your entire life, and just and it's like, here's the blue pill, but the red pill is you can work for yourself, and a lot of the freedom could be in your hands, and you can build your dream life yourself in other ways. And look, there's nothing wrong with working for someone else. I really want to emphasize that, because us having a company, it's like there will be people that work for us. So it's like, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, but then this idea, and it's something that never left me. Like, that idea incepted me, from like inception. And like, I could not let it go. This idea of working for myself after that point. And I do have to give a lot of credit to Jaron and helping me and teaching me a lot about that stuff. And so fast forwarding back to, Swing Set Company and me leaving, I'm like, right before we left, I was like, Sarah, what if we start something? What if we start our own video production company or content creation company, creative studio? And Sarah's like, I don't know. Let me think about it. And then we get pushed out.
That voice too.
Yeah, that's my my nice Sarah voice. So we get pushed out, and then I start this we're at this new company, and so I'm like, all right, we have to put everything else on hold. But this is the important thing. I knew that the work we did here is going to reflect the work we'll do in the future for Stump Root. And so I was very intentional. I'm like, here are the two frameworks at the very least I want to implement to use. So what I did was, I had Sarah read Story Brand, even though she's familiar with a lot of stuff from Russell Brunson and those people, marketers that she'd learned years and years before. So I had her read Story Brand, and then the other part was the They Ask You Answer. So I had these two frameworks in my mind of how I want to do the branding for this company, and so that'll serve as a foundation for everything we do. Long story short is, our very first video ever in the company. So this was like weeks after, like, we started in middle to late summer, and we were sitting our heads down essentially for 2 to 3 weeks, not doing any video or anything. And I'm sure from the outside people are like, what the heck are they doing? But we were doing it the right way, And so then the very first video we put up on Instagram and TikTok. It goes viral simultaneously. And it was like, what the heck? And I'm like, but to us, it's like, well, not that we expected it to go viral, but I'm like, of course it went viral because we did it the right way. And the company was not prepared for it. And they made like hundreds of thousands just within those first couple weeks from that video, specifically from that video. And then a million since then. It's still a staple in their paid ads and stuff.
Organic too. Like, we never came in and asked for an ad budget. That was just never something that we did. And we were confident in being able to produce a great video, and like from the start, I don't think we thought it would grow to that level. But those videos, like HGTV picked up on it. Like, there was people reaching out for brand deals, and like there was just like a lot of opportunity. Like, they wanted to showcase the product on HGTV, and like it was like this whole thing. And like, it's just like the power of social media. But if we look back on that, it really came from taking the time to do good branding and really understand like story brand and all of that. And yeah, we're grateful that we listen to our guts and not like feel that pressure from everyone else, because the temptation is to just as soon as you started at a company, especially in this industry, it's like, okay, quick, put up a post. And it's like, we just didn't listen to that.
So then it was like we were rock stars at the company, but that wasn't. We were definitely met also with like weird tribalism, and we still weren't wanted within the company just because people were jealous, and so to kind of sum it up, the very end, like we knew several months or a few months in, we're like, all right, I think we just got to do Stump Root. Like I don't think it's going to be long lasting. And like, something Sarah said in her video, and we knew it wasn't the promised land. We knew that this was only a temporary holding place that we can grow and kind of show that we are able to do this thing. Like we did it with the previous company and we can do it with this one. And then like, all right, if we could do this, that means we could do it for ourselves. And so that's what we started really planning Stump Root. And it was, maybe February last year. Man, it feels like 20 years ago, but it was
literally.
It was February of last year, and we were like, and my plan was, all right, Sarah, we should plan, or actually, let me back up. We had bought this course from one of my favorite designers, or pair of designers. They're Chutzpah. If you hear the company Chutzpah, they do a lot of incredible work. They did the ILM logo. They do a lot of Disney and Pixar logos. They're incredible. Lots of other stuff as well, but
Super
they have a
talented.
course called Freelance and Business Stuff, something. It was all about like being a freelancer and going to that. And so, we split the course, they pay for it, and then we watch it together, and we learned so much. And that really gave us the confidence to go out on our own, I think. Like we learned about the legal stuff. And so we were slowly working at it. It got to be last May, about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, where we are we're more or less not done with the course, but we were more or less done with it. And so we had been doing the branding and figuring out our offers and our website. I was building up our website. And so my plan was, all right, hey, so August 1st, we want to shoot for getting clients. That way we can start saving money. And then when we're in the right place, we can quit our jobs. But
is that what happened?
Here's what happened. We were pushed off a cliff with no parachute, and to say nicely. And so then it was Memorial Day weekend, or after the day after Memorial Day. I come back and we come into the office 7:00, and then the boss fires us. And she was like, oh, it's a hard day to be CEO, and fires me, Sarah, her sister, basically my wife. He forgot about that she existed. My wife was doing like some freelance writing, more or less, contract writing. And then my other friend Sam, who got me the first job at the hatchery, he was working there as well. And so he laid all of us off. Because
the entire department.
Yep.
No one was spared.
And I have a lot of opinions and feelings about that, but I will save it. And so then we were like, all right, what do we do? So, my thought process, like Sarah talks about hers, but in mine, I'm like, I'm a father. I'm a husband. My wife doesn't work, like it was just any man who has gone through this, or anyone who's the sole provider, is like, you understand it. It's like, if I don't work, my wife and my child does not eat. We can lose our apartment. We're paying for a car. It's like the stuff, like it's a big deal. And so I was like,
how old
wait,
was your daughter then at that age?
Well, she's a little over a year old.
Yeah, little baby.
And and there's a lot I could say about the frustrations of being fired, and especially how they did it and why they did it, because it's nothing that we did. We were doing good work. It was other people within the company. So all that to say is that I was stuck with these two choices: either continue to do Stump Root and grow it immediately, or I can get another job and risk this happening again for the third time, fifth time for me personally. But I'm like, I can't work for these people again. Like I can't work for bosses like this, I should say. Like these guys who, like, they say they care, but they really don't. Like people who you are just a commodity to them. And that's not every boss. There are amazing bosses. And I hope and pray that I can become a boss like that myself, where I value people and they're not some number. But at that point, I had never experienced that. At least I didn't. Yeah. So I'll just say, so those are the choices. And so I had kind of put like a bolo out on LinkedIn. I'm like, guys, please help me. I don't know what to do. And so I had a couple of people reach out, and they were like toying around with the idea of like creating a position for me within their company, just because at that point I'd been so active on LinkedIn for years at that point,
Yeah.
and posting all of our wins and all the work that I do, the photo, video, design, everything. So everyone knew what was up with me. And they're like,
Tim
oh,
could
we can find.
do a master class on LinkedIn. He's very knowledgeable on it. Like you really are. Like you just have a lot of insight on it, but that's just a
Yeah,
side
in
note.
some ways. In other ways, I have no idea what I'm doing. Um, but and I'm sure that's probably true for most people doing this stuff. But they so there's my options, and I had that idea, but then I was like I said before, I'm like, but I don't want to have this happen again. And so, but the more I
Yeah.
worked on Stump Root, the more peace I felt. And I really took that from God. I'm like, God, this seems like what you want me to do. So that's what I did. We put everything, all of our eggs into the Stump Root basket. And instead of having 2-3 months to work on this, I'm like, all right, Sarah, we have 1 weekend to get everything ready. So Monday we can start looking for clients. And so that's what we did. I finished the logo, I finished the website.
Yeah.
Sarah's doing the copywriting, and we're doing all this stuff. And so then
It was a
and so that's kind of
whirlwind.
yeah, and then that leads to the story of Stump Root, and that's where we are today. And almost exactly a year later, our anniversary is the 23rd of May, and it's a huge whirlwind, but such a huge blessing. And I never thought I'd make it here today, but we're here, and we're thriving, and God's been good, and so
Yeah, that was a crazy time. And, there's some parts of Tim's story that obviously intersects with my own because we had worked at 2 different companies together prior. That's actually where we realized, hey, we could work together. Like we could actually like bond over talking about funnels and like
not
design
funnel
and
cakes,
branding, not funnel cake.
click funnels.
Although funnel
But also, I do
cake
love
is
funnel
quite
cake.
good. Yeah, we do love funnel cake. But yeah, and it was what's funny like about just your whole story and then like where it intersects with my own is that it's hard to look at the lessons going into it, right? It's only like in the aftermath where you're like, oh, got it. Okay, that's why I needed to go through that. Like, oh, there wasn't waste in the wandering
Yeah.
by any means. And working with these companies, I have like a different perspective on it, and so does Tim, than most people. Because like they, when you're fired from somewhere, usually people they're like, oh well, it was all bad. And
Yeah.
I'm like, if you're gonna blame something for the bad, you also need to blame it for the good and be fair.
Yeah.
And what we learned in those jobs was a lot of what not to do, and then also just how we work. And it was an opportunity to bring in these skill sets and hone in on them, but also like, we were going viral at both of those companies. And, being able to talk about that then on like LinkedIn, that actually set us up to bring in clients today. And so my point is that there was no waste in it. And I'd encourage anyone listening to really remember that, because like if you're in a hard season, like really just, I don't mean it in a cliche way, but like really just try to find the good and be grateful and be patient, because then you're going to be able to look back and be like, wow, like I see why I was called into that. I see why I was led into that whole experience. And, what Tim said, like it's by God's grace, honestly. What's something that you, Tim, are really proud about with Stump and Root? And I don't necessarily mean like monetary. That could be something, but maybe just something that you are learning, or that's worth more than any amount of money that you could make.
I would say the most valuable thing to me has been being able to see my daughter like throughout the day. Like to me, like it's a feeling that most fathers they're not able to have, like a lot of fathers, they'll work 50, 60 hours a week, and they really don't get a lot of time to see their children. And I knew I didn't want to be that father. Like I wanted to be there and be there for their child and enjoy it, and have them know that me as a father, that I'm there for them in those moments, not just in the big times, but in the big moments, but also in the in between. So having like going up for lunch almost every day is an amazing feeling. Hearing my little daughter open my door and just like come in and run and smile, and like it's the best feeling in the world. So having that freedom really is amazing. The funny thing is, like, I remember when I was working at the hatchery and even jobs after that, I had this almost like rose tinted glass, like rose tinted glasses, looking back at my jobless period of life, because I was like, why do I miss it? Even though I hated being in the middle of it. But there was a freedom that I had. I was able to walk, 2-3 miles to the city from where I lived, and I was able to sit in a cafe and I can work on my portfolio. And there was all this freedom that I had lost at that point. But now I'm like, I have that back. Like I have that freedom. I can, and we do that. We go to cafes and we'll work on stuff together. And so, that's something that I think I'm super proud of, that I'm able to be my own person, my own man, and work with the people that I deeply connect with and resonate with. And it's a different kind of feeling when you feel like you're in control,
Yeah. I think like your family makes it worth it. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing this for. And there's a verse in the Bible that says like perfect love casts out all fear. And there can be, I was actually at a dinner last night with some people at church, and one of the husband, he's a business owner, and we were talking about how it affords you so much freedom being a business owner, but there can be so much fear wrapped up in it. And
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and it's not for the faint at heart. And I think like when like I'll never forget like going to pitch our first client, and we signed that client within 8 days. And we were both like, I mean, mind you guys, like we were just fired. Like our whole department was fired, and there was just like a lot at stake. And I remember we pitched it, we secured the client, and we'll always be grateful to that client for that, for taking a chance on us. But I remember I have a picture of it, you hugging your daughter, Gemma, and right before the call. And it was just like all the fear goes away, because it's like, this is who I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for my family. And I'll have to send you that photo, because it's come up in like memories sometimes. And I'm like, that's a great photo. It's literally like seconds before we got on that call. So what would you say is the hardest part about being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I would say stress is definitely the hardest part of it, because it's like there's no safety net, like, and that's true even for, traditional jobs. There's no real safety net. But, with a traditional job, when you're not the boss, you go in, you have a set amount of things you do, and then you leave. But when you own your own business or you're an entrepreneur, like, you can't clock out.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't shut off, and I think maybe eventually, if Lord willing, we can grow our studio to a place, I would be able to do that, where I'm like, all right, my work stays at work and my office is at work, and I think that kind of might help a little bit. But I would say the difficulty has been kind of hat switching, like going from design to video to photo to social strategy to this and that. So that combined with the stress of like growing a business while building the business, while being in the business, and it's
well, being the faces of the business.
It really is like a tightrope, kind of like that you're walking, that you're trying to balance all these different things, and doing the work for companies, which fuels your business, but then you're growing the company by growing your business, by building your business, by being in the. It's like building a plane while you're flying it. And it's scary, but it's also like, it'll be worth it, and it is worth it already, just by being able to see my family as often as I do. And the freedom that it affords us, like that we can, hey, let's go get lunch with so-and-so, or I can get lunch with someone or breakfast and catch up with someone, or, just get to know people and make connections. And also we don't have crappy bosses, because if we have a crappy boss, it's because of us, so it's like, like there's that freedom too. And that's something that, that I really enjoy.
We are the chokehold of it, and I think it takes a lot of responsibility. Like if you have an issue with taking responsibility in your life, do not become a business owner,
Yeah.
because you're confronted every day with your own duplicity and mistakes. And it's, yeah, but it's also the greatest teacher. Like, if you want to learn so much about yourself and other people and stepping outside of your comfort zone, become a business owner. So it's like life university. Last question. If you could go back and talk to little Tim before all this happened, and he's having just these dreams and realizations of, wow, film and art and becoming a creative, what would you tell him?
Yeah, like, it was funny. I had posted something like this on LinkedIn where I had created this image, of myself currently talking to my like 16, 17-year-old self. And I kind of went through that whole thought experiment. Like, what would I tell myself? Like, what I think the big thing I would tell him would be remain steadfast. Like, it's going to get a lot more hard. It's going to get a lot more difficult before it gets better. But don't lose heart because of it. And like, just even to quote myself, I'm like, you just got to keep holding on, remain steadfast no matter what. Because you think that the difficulty is the end, but it's not. It's not the end. It's only the beginning. You're capable of more than you realize. You aren't your failures. You aren't the lies and malice that people have told you. You have purpose and meaning, and rejection does not define you. And that's probably what I'd tell myself. Like, just those words. You aren't what people tell you you are. And that keep holding on, because it does get better.
Remain steadfast and don't lose heart. Tim, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. We work together, but I got to actually learn a lot more about you and your story through this. And you're a very inspiring person, and you're appreciated. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was our little podcast. And you can find us on our website at stumpandroot.co. If you want to learn more about our branding and design studio. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. And we're just so grateful for every listen. Thank you again. Bye.